Some people are born with silver spoons in their mouths. Jason Carter was born with one too, until his father ripped it away and left him with nothing but hunger and shame. Jason Carter was 7 years old the night his father left, remembered every detail. It was a Tuesday in March, and his parents had been arguing for hours behind their bedroom door. Jason sat at the top of the stairs in their large house in Connecticut, listening to his mother's voice break as she pleaded with his father about something Jason didn't understand. His father, Robert Carter, was a successful real estate developer worth approximately $8 million. Not billionaire rich, but comfortable, very comfortable. They lived in a 5-bedroom house. Jason went to private school. They took vacations to Europe. Life was good. Until it wasn't. That night, Jason watched his father walk down the stairs carrying 2 suitcases. Robert's face was hard, emotionless. He didn't even glance at Jason as he passed. "Dad?" Jason called out, his 7-year-old voice small and confused. "Where are you going?" Robert stopped at the door. For a moment, Jason thought his father would turn around, would explain, would say something comforting. Instead, Robert just said, "Take care of your mother," and walked out. That was it. No hug. No explanation. No promise to visit. Just gone. Jason's mother, Elena, came down the stairs moments later, mascara running down her face. She pulled Jason into her arms and held him while she sobbed. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, but Jason could tell she didn't believe it. And she was right not to. Over the next few weeks, Jason learned the truth about why his father had left. Robert had been having an affair with a younger woman, his secretary predictably, and had decided to start a new life with her. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that Robert had liquidated most of his assets and moved the money into accounts that Elena couldn't access. He planned his exit carefully, making sure he kept his wealth while leaving his family with almost nothing. The house they'd lived in? It was heavily mortgaged, and Robert stopped making payments. The private school Jason attended? His father refused to pay tuition. The comfortable life they'd known? Gone overnight. Elena hired a lawyer, but Robert's attorney was better. The divorce settlement gave Elena a fraction of what she deserved, just enough that Robert didn't look completely heartless in court, but nowhere near enough to maintain their previous lifestyle. Within 6 months, they'd lost the house. Elena and Jason moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a rough neighborhood. Elena, who'd been a stay-at-home mom, suddenly had to find work with no recent job experience. She ended up working 3 jobs, waitressing at a diner during the day, cleaning offices at night, and doing data entry work from home whenever she could. She was exhausted constantly, aged rapidly, but she never complained. At least not where Jason could hear. Jason, meanwhile, went from a kid who'd had everything to a kid who had nothing. He went to public school now, where the other kids teased him for his second-hand clothes and old backpack. He went from having his own bedroom with video games and toys to sleeping on a pull-out couch in the living room. But the hardest part wasn't the poverty. It was watching his mother slowly break under the weight of it all. And knowing that his father, his wealthy, comfortable father, could help them any time he wanted but chose not to. Robert had remarried within a year. His new wife was 26 years old, 10 years younger than Elena. They lived in a penthouse in Manhattan. Robert's business continued to thrive. He had money, success, happiness. Meanwhile, his ex-wife worked herself to exhaustion, and his son wore shoes with holes in them. Jason saw his father exactly 3 times after the divorce. Mandatory visitations that Robert's lawyer had insisted on to make him look good in court. Each visit was awkward, forced. Robert would take Jason to expensive restaurants, give him a few toys, then send him home. Jason could tell his father didn't actually want to be there. After the 3rd visit, when Jason was 9 years old, Robert said something that Jason would never forget. They were sitting in Robert's luxury car outside Jason's apartment building. Robert looked uncomfortable, like he couldn't wait for Jason to get out. "Listen, Jason," Robert said, not quite meeting his son's eyes. I know this situation isn't ideal. But you need to understand, I've moved on with my life. I have a new family now. Sarah and I are expecting a baby. You're always going to be my son, but things are different now. You mean you don't want to see me anymore, Jason said flatly. Even at 9, he understood what his father was really saying. Robert didn't deny it. I think it might be easier for everyone if we took some space. Your mother and I don't get along, and these visits are stressful for everyone involved. So you're abandoning me again. I'm not abandoning you. I'll still send the child support payments, barely enough for rent, Jason interrupted, something he'd overheard his mother saying to her lawyer. Robert's face hardened. Jason, one day you'll understand that life is complicated. Sometimes people grow apart. Sometimes you have to make choices. I've made mine. Yeah, Jason said, opening the car door. You chose your new family over us. I understand perfectly. He got out of the car and never looked back. That was the last time Jason saw his father for 17 years. That night, lying on his pull-out couch while his mother worked the night shift, Jason made himself a promise. He was going to be successful. Not just comfortable, wealthy. Richer than his father had ever been. And one day he'd make Robert Carter see exactly what he'd thrown away. Jason threw himself into becoming successful with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. He worked throughout high school, bagging groceries, mowing lawns, anything to help his mother and save money. But he also studied relentlessly. He knew education was his ticket out of poverty, and he wasn't going to waste the opportunity. His grades were perfect. His test scores were exceptional. And when college application time came, Jason applied to every scholarship he could find, got a full ride to Columbia University. His mother cried when she found out. Happy tears this time. I'm so proud of you, baby, Elena said, holding him tight. You did this all on your own. No, Jason said firmly. You worked 3 jobs so I could study. This is as much your achievement as mine. At Columbia, Jason majored in finance and computer science. He worked part-time throughout college, sent money home to his mother every month, and still maintained a 3.9 GPA. He slept 4 hours a night. He had no social life. He was driven by a single goal, success. During his junior year, Jason met a professor named Dr. Malcolm Rivers, who would change his life. Dr. Rivers taught a course on financial technology and saw something special in Jason. You have the mind of an entrepreneur, Dr. Rivers told him after class one day. You shouldn't be working for someone else after graduation. You should be building something. With what capital? Jason asked bitterly. I'm graduating with $30,000 in student debt, even with scholarships. Ideas don't require capital. Execution does. But if the idea is good enough, capital finds you. That conversation planted a seed. Jason started thinking about problems that needed solving. And he found one in an unexpected place, his mother's life. Elena was still working multiple jobs, and Jason watched her struggle with managing her finances. She'd miss payments because she forgot due dates. She'd overdraft because she didn't realize when different jobs deposited their paychecks. She'd get hit with fees and penalties that ate away at her meager earnings. Jason realized that millions of working-class Americans had the same problem. They weren't irresponsible with money. They were juggling so many things that traditional banking tools didn't work for them, so Jason built an app. He called it Shift Balance. It was designed for people working multiple jobs, with a regular income, who needed help managing their finances across various payment schedules. The app would track income from different sources, predict cash flow, send alerts about upcoming bills, and even offer microloans to cover gaps between paychecks. Jason built the first version himself, working 18-hour days for 6 months. He tested it on his mother and her co-worker friends. The feedback was overwhelming. They loved it. With Dr. Rivers's help, Jason pitched the app at a university startup competition. He won second place and $50,000 in seed funding. It wasn't enough to really launch, but it was a start. Jason graduated from Columbia in 2015 at age 22. Instead of taking a high-paying job at a tech company or investment bank, he had offers from both. He used his prize money to develop shift balance full-time. His mother thought he was crazy. "Jason, you have a degree from Columbia. You could be making six figures right now. Why are you risking everything on an app?" "Because I'm going to build something bigger than a six-figure salary, Mom. Trust me." Elena did trust him. She'd watched her son work harder than anyone she'd ever known. If anyone could succeed, it was Jason. For the first year, Jason lived in a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn, eating ramen and working around the clock. Shift Balance launched officially in early 2016. Growth was slow at first, but steady. Word of mouth spread among working-class communities. The app was free. Jason made money through partnerships with ethical lenders and by charging small fees for premium features. By the end of 2016, Shift Balance had 100,000 users. By mid-2017, it had 1 million users. Venture capitalists started noticing. Jason took meetings with VCs, and he was unlike any entrepreneur they'd typically met. He wasn't a privileged kid with a trust fund playing startup founder. He was the kid who'd lived the problem his app solved, who'd watched his mother struggle, who understood his users because he'd been one of them. In late 2017, Jason raised $15 million in series of funding at a $75 million valuation, was 24 years old and technically a multi-millionaire on paper. The first thing he did with his founder's proceeds was buy his mother a house. Not in the old wealthy neighborhood where they'd lived with his father. Elena didn't want to go back there. But a nice house in a good area. Fully paid off in her name only. "You don't have to work anymore, Mom," Jason told her as he handed her the keys. Elena cried. "Jason, this is too much. Nothing is too much for you. You worked 3 jobs for 12 years, so I could have a chance. This is just the beginning of paying you back." But Jason wasn't done building. Shift Balance continued growing exponentially. By 2019, it had 8 million users. Jason raised a Series B at a $600 million valuation. His personal stake was worth approximately $200 million. He was just getting started in 2020. During the pandemic, Shift Balance became essential. With millions of Americans losing jobs or working reduced hours, the app's features for managing irregular income became more important than ever. Usage exploded. By 2021, Shift Balance had 25 million users. Jason raised a Series C at a $3.2 billion valuation, was 28 years old and worth over $1 billion on paper. Jason Carter had gone from sleeping on a pull-out couch to being a self-made billionaire. He'd surpassed his father's net worth by more than 100 times over. And that's when things got complicated. Jason first learned that his father knew about his success from a message on LinkedIn. It was a connection request from Robert Carter, accompanied by a message, "Jason, I've been following your incredible success with Shift Balance. I'd love to reconnect and catch up. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished." Dad Jason stared at the message for a full minute, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Anger, satisfaction, curiosity, bitterness. His father hadn't reached out in 17 years. Not once. Not for Jason's high school graduation. Not for Columbia. Not when Shift Balance launched. But now that Jason was a billionaire, now Robert wanted to reconnect. Jason's first instinct was to ignore the message. Or better yet, block his father entirely. But there was a part of him, the 7-year-old boy who'd watched his father walk out, that wanted this moment. Wanted to show Robert exactly what he'd missed. Wanted to see the regret on his father's face, so Jason responded, "Coffee next Tuesday. Manhattan. I'll send you the address." Tuesday came. Jason chose the meeting place deliberately, an upscale coffee shop in Midtown, near his penthouse office. He arrived early, wearing a tailored Tom Ford suit that cost more than his mother's first year of rent after the divorce. Robert walked in exactly on time. He was 58 now, his hair graying at the temples. Still handsome, still carrying himself with that confidence Jason remembered. But there was something else in his expression when he saw Jason, something that looked like nervousness. "Jason," Robert said, extending his hand. "You look successful." Jason shook his father's hand briefly. "I am. Please sit." They ordered coffee. There was an awkward silence. "So," Robert began, "shift balance. It's remarkable what you've built. $1 billion company. Before 30. That's incredible." $3 billion, actually, Jason corrected. "We closed our Series C last month at a $3.2 billion valuation." Robert's eyes widened slightly. $3 billion. Jesus. You've surpassed anything I ever accomplished. "That was the goal," Jason said flatly. Another awkward pause. Robert seemed to be struggling with what to say. Finally he spoke. "Jason, I know I wasn't there for you. I know I made mistakes. But I want you to know that I've thought about you over the years. Wondered how you were doing. I tried to reach out a few times, but your mother—" "Don't," Jason interrupted, his voice hard. "Don't you dare blame Mom. You left us with nothing. She worked 3 jobs for 12 years while you lived in a penthouse with your new wife. You could have helped us any time you wanted. You chose not to." Robert flinched. "You're right. I was selfish. I was thinking about my own happiness, and I didn't consider how hard it would be for you and Elena. I regret that." "Do you?" Jason leaned forward. "Or do you regret it now that I'm successful? Because let's be honest, Dad. If I was working at a grocery store right now, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Robert didn't deny it. "You're probably right. But Jason, the fact that you succeeded despite everything, that says something about your character. You're stronger than I ever was." "I'm stronger because I had to be. Because you abandoned us." "I know. And I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." Jason studied his father's face, looking for sincerity. He found something there, but he wasn't sure if it was genuine remorse or just guilt at seeing what he'd missed out on. "Why did you really want to meet?" Jason asked. "What do you want from me?" Robert hesitated. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I just wanted to see the man you'd become. Maybe I wanted to apologize. Maybe I wanted a chance to be part of your life again. After 17 years. I know it's a lot to ask." Jason sat back, processing this. Part of him wanted to tell his father to go to hell, to enjoy the satisfaction of rejection, of turning away the man who turned away from him. But another part, a part he didn't want to acknowledge, felt something else. Not forgiveness, exactly. But maybe curiosity. Maybe the faint possibility of closure. "I'll think about it," Jason finally said. "But Dad, if we do this, if I give you a chance to be in my life again, it's not going to be on your terms. You don't get to just show up because I'm successful now and pretend the last 17 years didn't happen." "I understand. And you're going to apologize to Mom. Properly. For everything." Robert nodded. "I will. I should have done that years ago." They talked for another hour. It was stilted, uncomfortable, but not hostile. Robert asked about shift balance, about Jason's life. Jason kept his answers guarded, revealing little. This was still a stranger, regardless of biology, as they were leaving. Robert said something unexpected. "Jason, I know this doesn't fix anything, but I want you to know I kept tabs on you over the years. I knew when you got into Colombia. I knew when you launched your app. I was proud of you, even if I had no right to be. If you were so proud, why didn't you reach out sooner?" "Because I was ashamed," Robert admitted. I knew how badly I'd failed you. I didn't think you'd want to hear from me. I thought maybe it was better to just leave you alone to build your life without me in it." Jason didn't respond immediately. Finally, he said, "Maybe it was better. I became who I am because I had to. Because you weren't there. I don't know if I would have fought so hard if I'd had your support." That's a generous way to look at it. It's the truth. I'm not grateful you left, Dad. But I'm grateful for who I became because of it. They parted ways with an agreement to meet again in a few weeks. Jason walked back to his office feeling unsettled. He'd imagined this confrontation for years, the moment he'd show his father how successful he'd become, how wrong Robert had been to abandon him. But now that it had happened, Jason didn't feel the satisfaction he'd expected. He felt empty, confused. What he didn't know was that everything was about to get much more complicated. 2 weeks after his meeting with Robert, Jason received an unexpected call from his mother. "Jason, can you come over?" Elena's voice was strange, tight. "There's something I need to tell you." "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just, please come. It's important." Jason drove to his mother's house immediately, his mind racing with possibilities. Was she sick? Was there a problem with the house? When he arrived, Elena was sitting at her kitchen table, an old shoebox in front of her. She looked pale, nervous. "Mom, what's going on?" Elena took a deep breath. "Your father called me. He said you two met for coffee. That you might be willing to give him another chance." "We talked about that possibility, yes. I told him he needed to apologize to you first." "He did," Elena said quietly. "He called me yesterday. We talked for over 2 hours." Jason sat down. And it made me realize that I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago, but I didn't because I was angry and hurt, and I thought I was protecting you." "Mom, you're scaring me." Elena opened the shoebox. Inside were letters, dozens of them, still in their envelopes. "These are from your father," she said. "He wrote you almost every month for the first 5 years after he left." Jason stared at the letters, not comprehending. "What? No. Dad never tried to contact me after those first few visits." "He did, Jason. He sent letters. Elena's voice broke. "I never gave them to you. I threw them away as they came. These are the few I kept because I couldn't bring myself to destroy them completely." Jason felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. You hid letters from me? For 17 years. I was so angry at him, Jason. He'd destroyed our lives. Abandoned us. I didn't want him to have any relationship with you. I thought he'd given up his right to be your father. Jason opened one of the letters with shaking hands. It was dated about 6 months after Robert had left. The handwriting was his father's. "Dear Jason, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to write it anyway. I miss you. I know what I did was unforgivable, and I understand if you hate me. But I want you to know that leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. I hope you're doing well in school. Your mother told my lawyer that you're struggling with the adjustment to public school. I wish I could help more. The divorce settlement isn't what I wanted, but my business has hit some rough patches and my lawyer says I can't afford to pay more right now. I think about you every day. I love you. Dad. Jason read several more letters. They were all similar, apologies, explanations, expressions of love and regret. In later letters, Robert wrote about his business troubles, about how the divorce and his remarriage had been more expensive than he'd anticipated, about how he wanted to help but was financially constrained. He was lying, Jason said, his voice hollow. You told me he was wealthy, that he could afford to help us any time. Elena's face crumpled. I believed that too, Jason. I was so focused on my anger that I never questioned it. But when Robert called me yesterday, he told me the truth. His business did collapse. About a year after the divorce. He lost almost everything. He wasn't living in penthouses and buying yachts. He was working 2 jobs himself just to pay the divorce settlement and child support. Jason felt like he was in a dream. A nightmare. What? The woman you saw him with, Sarah, she wasn't his secretary. She was his accountant, helping him file for bankruptcy. They didn't get married until years later, after he'd rebuilt his career. By then, I'd already poisoned you against him so thoroughly that he thought reaching out would just make things worse. So everything I believed about him was wrong? Not everything. He did have an affair. He did leave us. Those things are true. But the narrative that he abandoned us to live a life of luxury while we suffered? That he chose money over family? That wasn't true, Jason. He was struggling too. And I was so angry that I never wanted you to know that. I wanted you to hate him as much as I did. Jason stood up abruptly, the letters scattering across the table. He felt sick. His entire motivation, everything he built, had been driven by a lie. You let me hate him for 17 years, Jason said, his voice shaking. You let me think he was this monster who didn't care about us. I worked myself to exhaustion trying to become richer than him, trying to prove that he was wrong to leave me. And it was all based on a lie you told me. I know, Elena sobbed. I know, and I'm so sorry, Jason. I was wrong. I was bitter and vindictive, and I used you to punish him. I've regretted it for years, but I didn't know how to tell you the truth without destroying your relationship with me. Jason looked at his mother, the woman he'd worked so hard for, the woman he bought a house for, the woman he'd idolized his entire life, and felt a betrayal even deeper than his father's abandonment. I need to leave, he said quietly. Jason, please, I can't do this right now, Mom. I can't. He left, driving aimlessly through the city, his mind reeling. Everything he thought he knew about his past was a lie. His father hadn't been the villain. His mother hadn't been the innocent victim. They'd both made terrible choices that had damaged their son in ways that would take years to unpack. And Jason? He'd built a billion-dollar empire on a foundation of false anger and misdirected revenge. He didn't know what to do with that information. Jason didn't speak to his mother for 2 weeks. He couldn't. Every time he thought about calling her, he remembered the letters, the lies, the years of manufactured hatred. But he did reach out to his father. They met again, this time at Robert's modest apartment in Queens. Not a penthouse. Not a mansion. A simple 2-bedroom apartment that Robert shared with his wife Sarah and their teenage daughter, Jason's half-sister, whom he'd never met. You told Mom the truth, Jason said when Robert opened the door. I did. I should have done it years ago. I was afraid you'd think I was making excuses. They sat in Robert's living room. Sarah made coffee and quietly excused herself, taking their daughter to another room to give them privacy. Tell me everything, Jason said. I want to hear your side. All of it. And Robert did. He explained how his affair had started, a moment of weakness during a rough patch in his marriage. How he'd fallen for Sarah but had handled everything in the worst possible way. How the divorce had been messy, and more expensive than he'd anticipated. My business was already struggling before the divorce, Robert explained. Real estate development is high risk. I had 3 projects that failed around the same time. I lost everything. The settlement your mother's lawyer negotiated looked generous on paper, but it was based on my net worth before the collapse. I couldn't actually afford it. So why didn't you go back to court? Explain the situation. Pride, Robert admitted, and fear that your mother would think I was lying to avoid paying. By the time I realized, I should have been honest. From the beginning, too much time had passed. The narrative was set. I was the rich ex-husband who'd abandoned his family. Trying to change that story would have just made me look worse. What about the letters? Robert's face showed real pain. I wrote you every month for 5 years. I thought you were getting them and choosing not to respond, which I understood. I thought you hated me. When you never wrote back, I eventually stopped. I figured you'd moved on and I should let you. I never got a single one until 2 weeks ago. I know that now. Your mother told me. Jason, I'm so sorry. I failed you in so many ways. I should have tried harder to stay in your life. I should have been honest about my financial situation. I should have fought for custody or at least consistent visitation instead of just giving up. Jason processed this. But you did give up. Even if you were struggling financially, even if Mom was hiding your letters, you stopped trying. You let me go. You're right, Robert said simply. I did. And that's on me. I was overwhelmed, ashamed, and I convinced myself that you were better off without me. That was cowardice, not wisdom. I should have fought harder. They talked for hours. Jason met his half-sister Emma, who was 15 and sweet and nervous about meeting her famous billionaire half-brother. Sarah made dinner, and for the first time since he was 7 years old, Jason sat at a table with his father and felt something like family. Tea wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was understanding. And maybe that was a start point. 6 months later, Jason stood on a stage at a tech conference, giving a keynote speech about shift-balance journey, talked about growing up in poverty, about watching his mother work 3 jobs, about the anger that had driven him to succeed. But then he said something that surprised the audience. For years, I thought I was building shift balance to prove something to my father, to show him what he'd missed out on by leaving me, to become so successful that he'd regret his choice. And yes, I did become successful. More successful than I ever imagined. But you know what I learned? He paused, looking out at the crowd. I learned that building a company on anger and revenge is like building a house on sand. It works for a while, but it's not sustainable. The real success, the real satisfaction, came when I shifted my motivation from proving something to my father to helping people like my mother. Like me. Like everyone who's ever struggled to make ends meet while working multiple jobs. Jason spotted his mother in the audience, and his father sitting a few rows behind her. They weren't sitting together, they weren't friends, would probably never be friends, but they were both there. Both supporting him. I recently reconnected with my father after 17 years, Jason continued. And I learned that the story I'd been telling myself about my past wasn't complete. It wasn't entirely true. We all tell ourselves stories about who the heroes and villains are in our lives. But people are more complicated than that. My father made mistakes. My mother made mistakes. And I've made plenty of my own. Shift balance succeeded not because I was angry, but because I was empathetic. Because I understood the problem intimately. Because I cared about solving it. That's what I want to share with you today. Build things because you care, not because you're angry. Work hard because you love the mission, not because you're trying to prove something. And if you're lucky enough to achieve success, use it to heal old wounds, not to reopen them. The audience applauded. After the speech, Jason met with both of his parents separately. It was still too complicated for them to be together in the same room. With his father, Jason was building a relationship slowly, carefully. They had coffee once a month. No expectations. No pressure. Just 2 men trying to figure out if they could be father and son again. With his mother, the relationship was more complicated. Jason had forgiven her, but the trust would take time to rebuild. He still helped her financially, still loved her, but there was a distance now that might never fully close. And Jason? He was okay with that. He'd learned that some wounds don't fully heal. Some relationships can't be fully repaired, but they can evolve into something different. Something honest, even if it's imperfect. Jason Carter had become a billionaire trying to surpass his father. In the end, he'd surpassed him financially but learned something more valuable: that success means nothing if it's built on hatred. That family is complicated. That forgiveness is harder than revenge. And that sometimes, the person you thought was your villain was just another human being who made mistakes. He'd gone from rags to riches. But more importantly, he'd gone from anger to understanding. And that was worth more than any billion-dollar valuation.